The particle counter in clean room 7 has been reading 0 for the last 11 minutes, and that is not possible, and I have checked the instrument 3 times, and the instrument is functioning correctly, and the reading is 0, and 0 means the air in this room is cleaner than any air that exists anywhere on this planet outside of conditions that require technology we do not have in this facility. And I am standing in the middle of clean room 7 at 3:14 in the morning in a pharmaceutical plant in North Carolina in a Tyvek suit and a respirator and booties and double gloves, and I am looking at an instrument that is telling me something that cannot be true. And the silence in this room, the silence that is always present but that has a different quality tonight, a different density, is the silence of a room that is waiting for me to understand what the instrument is telling me. And I am not ready to understand it, and the room does not care whether I am ready. I need you to understand what clean rooms are before I tell you what happened in one. Because clean rooms are one of those environments that most people have a cultural image of without having any real understanding of. And the real understanding is what makes what I am going to describe as frightening as it is. A pharmaceutical clean room is a controlled environment in which the concentration of airborne particles is regulated to a specific standard, measured in particles per cubic meter of air, classified on a scale from ISO 1, which is the cleanest possible classification, to ISO 9, which is approximately the cleanliness of a typical indoor environment, meaning the air in the room you are sitting in right now. The pharmaceutical plant where I work maintains its primary manufacturing clean rooms at ISO 5, which is an extraordinarily clean environment, meaning no more than 3,500 particles of 0.5 microns or larger per cubic meter of air. To put that in context, a typical office environment contains approximately 35 million particles per cubic meter of that size. The clean room contains 3,500. The difference between those two numbers is the difference between the world you live in and the world inside the clean room. And maintaining that difference requires constant monitoring, constant filtration, constant management of every variable that could introduce particles into the environment, which is essentially every variable that exists in the physical world, because the physical world is particles, is matter in its smallest transportable form. And the clean room is a space that has declared war on the physical world and is winning barely, continuously, at enormous cost. I am a night shift environmental monitoring technician. My job is to verify that the clean rooms are what they are supposed to be, that the filters and the pressure differentials and the air handling systems are maintaining the controlled environment that the manufacturing process requires, that the product being made in these rooms, which is a pharmaceutical product that people will put into their bodies and depend on to do what it is supposed to do, is not being compromised by the introduction of particulate contamination that would render it ineffective or harmful. I take air samples. I take surface samples. I run viable particle counts and non-viable particle counts, and I document the results and I flag deviations. And I do this on the night shift because the night shift is when manufacturing is paused, when the rooms are empty of production personnel, when the environmental monitoring can be conducted without interference from the activity that the monitoring is designed to support. I work alone in these rooms at night, which is the condition that makes the monitoring feasible and the condition that I want you to hold in your mind for everything that follows. Because alone in a clean room at 3 in the morning is a specific kind of alone that I had not encountered before this job and have not encountered in any other context since. The plant is in a rural part of North Carolina, outside a small town that most people have not heard of, surrounded by pine forest and farmland that becomes, at night, as dark as the kind of dark that people from cities find genuinely shocking, the dark of no light pollution, of stars visible all the way to the horizon, of a sky that looks the way the sky was designed to look before human settlement. The plant itself is well lit, the kind of industrial facility brightness that keeps every corner of the exterior in clear white light, security lighting and parking lot lighting, and the lights of the production building itself, which runs equipment and HVAC and monitoring systems through the night even when production is paused, which means the plant is never truly dark, never truly quiet in the industrial sense. The hum of the HVAC and the clean room pressurization systems, a constant background that you feel in your feet and in your chest as much as you hear it with your ears. Inside the clean rooms, the HVAC becomes the dominant sensory experience. The air handling systems that maintain the clean room environment move a very large volume of air through HEPA filters at a very high rate, the air cycling through the room completely several times per minute. And the sound of this is a high-frequency white noise, a constant rushing that fills every corner of the room, and that, after enough exposure, the brain learns to filter out in the same way it filters out the sound of your own heartbeat, not consciously but continuously. The background becoming the baseline against which everything else registers. When I first started this job, the clean room air noise was present and obvious. Now, 8 months in, I hear it only when something changes, only when the baseline shifts, only when the air handling system produces a variation from its established pattern that the part of my brain that is still listening for changes registers and delivers to my conscious attention. The variation I am describing is not an increase or a decrease in the air noise. It is the presence of something in the air noise that should not be in it, something that sits at a different frequency from the HEPA filtration system's output, a sound that is below the air noise in register, and that I first became aware of on the night I am describing, the night of the zero reading, which is the night of the thing I am working toward, and which requires everything I have told you so far as its context, because without the context the thing is just a story. And with the context, it is something that I have been carrying for 7 months, and that I am writing down now, because carrying it alone has begun to cost more than I am willing to pay. I arrive for my shift at 10:45 p.m. The outgoing tech, a man named Desmond who has been at this plant for 4 years and who I have never had a conversation with that lasted longer than the handoff, gives me the status report for the evening, which is normal on all parameters, all rooms within specification, no deviations flagged, equipment functioning. He says this in the flat, efficient tone of someone whose shift has been entirely uneventful and who wants to go home, which is the tone of every handoff I have received from Desmond in 8 months, because Desmond's shifts are always uneventful, always flat, always without the texture of anything unexpected. And this is either because Desmond works the earlier portion of the night when the building is still populated, and the presence of other people smooths out whatever might otherwise present, or because Desmond has been here 4 years and has made some accommodation with what I am going to describe that I have not yet been offered. I have thought about this. I have not asked him. The handoff is efficient and Desmond leaves and I am alone in the plant. My monitoring route covers 7 clean rooms in sequence, starting with the lowest classification rooms, the ISO 8 packaging rooms, and working up to the ISO 5 primary manufacturing rooms, taking air samples and surface samples at designated points in each room, and logging the results in the monitoring system before moving to the next room. The sequence takes approximately 4 hours at a thorough pace, leaving time for documentation and any follow-up sampling required by deviations before the end of the shift. I have done this sequence 8 months of nights, approximately 240 times, and I know it with the depth of repetition that transforms a process from a procedure into something more like a physical memory. The hands doing what the hands know while the mind maintains the awareness level required for the specific tasks of assessment and documentation. The first 5 rooms on the sequence are unremarkable on the night I am describing. The particle counts are within specification. The surface samples are collected and plated. The documentation is entered. I am working efficiently and without incident through the first 2 hours of the shift, and I am in the rhythm of the work, the specific rhythm of a familiar route in a familiar environment. When I enter clean room 6, the first of the ISO 5 rooms, and notice that the air noise has something in it that it has not had in the previous 5 rooms. I stand inside the door of clean room 6 and I listen. The HEPA system is at its normal output, the white noise of high-volume air movement through fine filtration, and underneath it, at a register that I feel in my chest before I hear it with my ears, there is a low tone, not mechanical, not the harmonics of equipment resonance, which I know well from 8 months of nights in rooms with substantial HVAC infrastructure. Something below the mechanical, below the frequency range of the equipment, something that occupies the register of very low human vocalization, the register of a large person producing a sustained sound at the bottom of their range, except that there is no person in clean room 6, and there is no person in this facility who could produce a sound at that register. And the sound is sustained, not the brief artifact of a pressure change or a door seal settling, but sustained, continuous. At a constant frequency, present in the room the way the HEPA noise is present but entirely distinct from it, I check the room's pressure differential. Within specification, I check the air handling status indicator. Normal, I take my particle count sample. The count comes back at 2,100, well within the ISO 5 specification of 3,500, normal for this room at this time of night. I log the result. The low tone is present throughout. I take my surface samples and I complete the clean room 6 protocol, and I go to clean room 7 and the low tone is there too, at the same frequency, at the same sustained continuous character. And I stand in the middle of clean room 7 in my Tyvek and my respirator, and I look at my particle counter as it completes its sample cycle, and the display shows 0. I described this moment at the beginning of this account, and I want to return to it now with the context I have built, because 0 in this context is not just a number that seems wrong. 0 is a number that represents a physical impossibility in this environment. Every piece of equipment in the room sheds particles. The HEPA filtration system itself, running at its high volume and velocity, produces a small particle contribution from filter media wear, a background count that is typically between 800 and 1200 particles per cubic meter. And that is well within ISO 5 specification, but that is always present. That is the floor of what this room measures, the baseline below which the reading should not go. 0 means no particles. 0 means the air in this room is cleaner than the interior of a properly maintained semiconductor manufacturing facility, cleaner than any environment I have been trained to expect in a pharmaceutical plant, cleaner than anything the equipment in this room can produce. 0 means something is wrong with the instrument. I check the instrument. The instrument is functioning correctly. I take a second sample. 0. I take a third sample. 0. The instrument is working and the air is clean and the number is 0. and the low tone is in the room with me, and I am alone in clean room 7 at 3:14 in the morning in a pharmaceutical plant in North Carolina, and the silence underneath the tone, the silence that the tone is sitting in, has a quality that I have not experienced in 8 months of nights in this building. It has the quality of attention. Not my attention, though I am very attentive. The attention of the room. The attention of the space I am standing in, which is a sterile, controlled environment from which the physical world has been systematically excluded, and which tonight has excluded it with a thoroughness that the instruments confirm, and that the instruments cannot explain, and which is directing its attention at me with the specific quality of something that has been waiting for me to arrive at this particular room on this particular night, and is now registering my arrival with a thoroughness that matches. In its completeness and its specificity, the completeness and specificity of the clean room itself, I am being monitored. This is the understanding that arrives without permission in the middle of clean room 7 at 3:14 in the morning. The understanding that the monitoring in this room tonight is not only the monitoring I am performing with my instruments, but a reciprocal monitoring, a mutual observation, the room watching the technician with the same systematic attention that the technician is applying to the room. I do not run. Running in a clean room is a contamination event and a safety hazard, and 3 years of clean room training will not release their hold on a person, even in the specific circumstances I am describing, and I do not run. I complete my sample protocol for clean room 7. I take my surface samples. I log the 0 reading as a particle counter calibration check required, deviation flagged, and I walk out of the room at a professional pace, and I close the gowning room door behind me, and I stand in the gowning room, and I remove my outer gloves, and I look at the door I have just come through, and I listen. The low tone is present in the gowning room. It has followed me through the door, through the pressure differential, through the barrier that is supposed to separate the controlled environment from the corridor. It is in the gowning room at 3:17 in the morning, and it is at the same frequency and the same sustained continuous character, and I stand in the gowning room for 4 minutes listening to it, and then I complete my shift. I complete my shift because I have 6 rooms documented and 1 remaining, and the remaining room is clean room 7's adjacent support space, and I complete it and log it, and the particle count in that room is normal, and the low tone is not present in that room, and the absence of the tone in that room, after its presence in clean room 6 and 7, is the most unsettling single moment of the night, because the absence tells me that the tone is not a building-wide phenomenon, is not a structural resonance or an HVAC harmonic, is specific to the rooms I have identified, is contained, is located, is in those rooms and not in others, and the containment of it, the specificity, is the quality of something that is where it intends to be rather than where circumstances have put it. I file my deviation report for the 0 particle count, recommending instrument calibration and resampling. The calibration is performed the next day by the day shift QC team. The instrument is found to be within specification. The resampling of clean room 7 returns a count of 2,400, well within ISO 5. The deviation is closed as instrument calibration uncertainty, monitoring resumed without restriction. The clean room is declared normal. The day shift team does not report the low tone. I do not know whether this is because the low tone is not present during the day shift, which is the possibility I find most manageable, or because the day shift team has heard it and made the accommodation with it that Desmond has made, the accommodation that 4 years in this plant produces and that 8 months has not yet produced in me. I have not asked. The asking would require describing what I heard, and describing what I heard requires the listener to be in the kind of place, professionally and personally, that permits the description to be received as something other than a sign that the speaker needs time off. And I have not found that listener yet. I am looking for it in the writing of this account, in the possibility that the written version, removed from the clean room, removed from the 3 a.m. and the Tyvek and the zero reading, can carry what the spoken version in the break room at shift change cannot. And I am finding that the writing helps less than I hoped and more than I expected. And I am going back tonight for my shift, and I will stand in the gowning room of clean room 7 before I enter it, and I will listen. And whatever is in there will know that I am outside, and the knowing will be mutual, and the monitoring will go both ways, as it always has, as it has perhaps always gone in rooms that are clean enough, quiet enough, isolated enough from the particle noise of the world for whatever is in the frequency below the HEPA system's output to be audible, to be present, to turn its sustained continuous attention toward the person who has entered the space it occupies, and to wait. I have been thinking, in the 7 months since that night, about what zero means in a broader sense than the particle counter's reading. Zero particles means nothing of this world. It means the physical has been excluded completely in a way that no physical system can achieve. It means the room contains only what the physical cannot account for, only what the monitoring cannot capture, only what exists below the threshold of the instruments, in the frequency below the equipment, in the sustained low tone of something that does not shed particles because it is not composed of them, that occupies the sterile space, because the sterile space is the only space from which everything that might obscure it has been removed. The clean room is clean enough to contain it purely. The clean room is, I have come to understand, not a room from which contamination has been excluded, but a room in which the exclusion of contamination has made something else visible, has cleared the air of everything that normally fills it, and made the remaining thing audible, detectable, present in the zero reading way that presence at the boundary of the instrument's range is detectable, which is to say barely, only at the edge, only in the conditions of maximum exclusion of everything else. Only when the room is clean enough, only at 3 in the morning when the only person monitoring the space is a night shift environmental monitoring technician who is, himself, being monitored. Story number 2. The fog in the trees on the outskirts of Clearwater, Minnesota, does not behave the way fog behaves anywhere else. I have driven a spray truck, and I have driven spray trucks in 7 different counties across 3 states over 9 years of mosquito abatement work. And I know fog. I know the ways it hangs and moves and responds to the truck's passage and to the spray itself. And the fog in the trees on the Clearwater outskirts at 2 in the morning does not do any of those things in the ways I expect. And the not doing has been getting worse across the 6 weeks I have been on this seasonal contract. And the worst night of the not doing was 3 weeks ago. And what happened on that night is what I am going to tell you. But I need to tell you everything that led to it first, because the thing that happened on that night requires everything before it to be understood as the thing it was, which is the end point of a 6-week accumulation of wrong. Each wrong thing building on the previous wrong things, until the accumulation reached a threshold that I have not been able to put behind me in the 3 weeks since. I want to tell you about mosquito abatement work before I tell you about the woods, because mosquito abatement is one of those jobs that sounds simple when described, and is in practice the kind of work that puts you in contact with the natural world in its most specific and unmediated form, which is the form that the natural world takes at 2 in the morning in rural Minnesota, when the human presence that normally mediates the experience of it is reduced to one person in a spray truck on a back road, which is me. which is the situation I am in every night of this seasonal contract. The job is to reduce mosquito populations in designated zones through the application of approved pesticide formulations, delivered via truck-mounted spray equipment that disperses a fine mist at controlled rates and droplet sizes designed to reach and affect adult mosquitoes in their resting positions in vegetation, which is where adult mosquitoes are at 2 in the morning, resting in leaves and grass and low vegetation waiting for dawn, and where they are most accessible to a fogger truck moving at slow speed through the designated zone. The designated zone for my Clearwater contract is a series of rural roads on the western outskirts of the town, running through an area of mixed pine and hardwood forest interspersed with wetland areas, the kind of habitat that supports a very high mosquito population, and that is, for that reason, and for the reason of its low human traffic at night, the kind of area that mosquito abatement targets. The roads I drive are county roads, paved but narrow, with no shoulder in most places, the forest coming right to the edge of the pavement on both sides, the tree canopy meeting overhead on some stretches to create a tunnel effect that the spray truck's headlights illuminate with a quality of light that I can only describe as enclosed, the light bouncing back from the canopy above, and the trees on both sides rather than dissipating into open air, creating a sphere of illumination that moves with the truck and makes the darkness on the other side of the tree line feel very absolute, very present. The darkness of a dense forest at 2 in the morning that has not seen direct light since the sun set and will not see it again until the sun rises. The fog in this zone is consistent. Minnesota summer nights produce fog in areas with wetland proximity, which this area has, the low-lying areas staying warm enough after sunset to produce ground fog that settles in the low spots and drifts into the tree lines and hangs in the middle distances in the way that ground fog does, in disconnected patches and veils that the truck headlights pick up as bright white interruptions in the darkness ahead. I drive through fog every night on this contract. It is a constant of the work in this zone, and I account for it in my driving pace and in my spray rate calculations, because fog affects droplet behavior and visibility, and both need to be managed when you are dispersing pesticide from a moving vehicle on narrow roads in the dark. I know fog. I know what it does. I know what it looks like in the headlights and what it looks like through the side windows, and what it does when the truck passes through it, and what it does when the spray catches it, and what it does in still air and in moving air, and in the specific air of a pine and hardwood forest corridor at 2 in the morning. I know all of this, and I knew it before I came to Clearwater, and I have been refining the knowledge every night for 6 weeks. What I did not know before Clearwater, what Clearwater has taught me over 6 weeks of nights in the wooded outskirts, is that fog can wait. That is the best description I have, the description I have arrived at through 6 weeks of observation and 1 night of proof, the understanding that the fog in the woods on the western outskirts of Clearwater has, in certain conditions and in certain locations on my route, a quality of waiting, of position patience, that real meteorological fog, which is water droplets suspended in air and moved by air currents, does not possess. Real fog drifts. Real fog moves with the air that holds it. The fog in specific locations on my route does not drift. It hangs in the trees, and it is there when I pass on the first run, and it is there when I pass on the second run 2 hours later, in the same location, at the same density, and it is not that the conditions are producing continuous fog at that location, because I have checked the atmospheric data, and the conditions are not continuous fog-producing conditions. It is that the fog I am looking at on the second pass is the same fog I looked at on the first pass. Something has held it there. Something in the trees has held the fog in place for 2 hours while I drove the rest of the route, and when I drive past it a second time, the quality of it, the way it sits in the trees, has changed. Not in a way I can quantify. In a way I register in the part of the nervous system that registers things before the mind can quantify them. The part that tells you about the difference between a fog that is a meteorological condition and a fog that is something else. The first unwritten rule of this contract was given to me by the previous seasonal tech, a man named Roy who had worked this zone for 2 seasons before taking a full-time position with the county elsewhere, and who I met on my first day for a route familiarization drive. Roy is a large, quiet person who gives information in the economy of someone who has considered what to include and what to leave out, who delivers the relevant and holds the rest, and his route familiarization included the roads and the spray points and the equipment checks and the specific problem areas for road quality and tree canopy clearance. At the end of the familiarization, he said one additional thing, which he said in the tone of a different category of information from everything else, the tone of information he had decided to include despite having considered leaving it out. He said, on the stretch between mile markers 11 and 13 on County Road 8, there is a pull-off on the left side before the bridge. Do not pull into that pull-off at night. I asked why. He said the truck does not start reliably after stopping there at night. I asked if there was an electrical issue with the pull-off, meaning a ground issue in the road surface or electromagnetic interference from buried infrastructure, which is a real problem for some vehicle electronics in certain rural areas. He said, no, nothing like that. He said the truck runs fine everywhere else. He said the truck has been pulled off at that pull-off at night by 2 previous seasonal techs, and on both occasions needed to be towed because it would not restart. I asked if the county had investigated. He said they sent a mechanic who found nothing wrong with the truck either time. He said the trucks were different trucks, not the same vehicle on both occasions. He said, just don't pull in there at night. I did not pull into the pull-off at night for the first 5 weeks of the contract. This is the kind of instruction that a person who depends on their truck to function follows without extensive deliberation, because a truck that does not start at 2 in the morning on a rural road on the outskirts of a small town in Minnesota is a problem that has immediate practical consequences that override whatever curiosity might motivate ignoring the instruction. I followed the instruction. I noted the pull-off each time I passed it. I noted the fog. The pull-off in the stretch between mile markers 11 and 13 on County Road 8 is adjacent to a section of the tree line that holds the positioned fog I have described. One of the locations where the fog sits in the same position on first pass and second pass, and where the quality of it registers differently from meteorological fog. I noted this across 5 weeks of 2 passes per night, 10 passes per week, 50 passes total across 5 weeks, and the fog in that section of the tree line was consistent in its positioned character and consistent in its quality in a way that built, over 50 observations, into a certainty that the consistency was not meteorological, that the fog was in that location, and in that character because something in the trees was holding it there, and that the pull-off and its demonstrated effect on truck electrical systems was related to the tree line and whatever was in it, in a way that Roy had decided not to explain in detail and that I was developing over 50 passes, an increasing need to understand. The night of the event is a Wednesday in July. I am on my first pass of the route, which begins at 1:45 a.m. and covers the full circuit of my designated zone before the second pass begins, and I am approximately 40 minutes into the pass when I reach the mile 11 mark on County Road 8. The fog tonight is heavier than usual across the full route, a genuine meteorological condition contributing to the elevated baseline, and I am running the spray at a reduced rate to account for the droplet behavior in high-humidity air. The fog in the tree line between mile markers 11 and 13 is, as always, in its position in its hanging, waiting quality, and as I drive past the pull-off I see, in the headlights, something I have not seen in 50 previous passes. There is a shape in the fog. In the tree line, at the edge of the tree line where the fog is densest, there is a shape that is not a tree and not a branch and not the irregular form of vegetation at the edge of visibility. It is vertical. It is regular. It has the proportion of a large person standing very still in the fog, at the edge of the tree line, facing the road. And it is not moving, and it is not a person because it is 2:43 in the morning on a back road in rural Minnesota. And there is no person who has a reason to be standing in a tree line in heavy fog at 2:43 in the morning facing a spray truck route. And yet the shape is there, and it is vertical and it is regular, and it does not move as I drive past it, and I watch it in the side mirror as I continue down the road, and it does not turn to follow the truck, and it does not move, and then the road curves and the mirror shows me only road and fog behind me, and I am past it. I complete the first pass. I return to the mile 11 section for the second pass at approximately 3:45 a.m., 2 hours after the first pass. The fog in the tree line is in its position. The pull-off is on my left. I do not intend to stop, and then the truck stops. Not because I brake, not because I choose to stop, but because the engine cuts out, completely and instantaneously, in the way that an ignition failure cuts an engine, all at once with no sputtering or hesitation, and the truck rolls to a stop in front of the pull-off, in the exact position that stopping in front of the pull-off puts a vehicle, and the headlights go out with the engine, and the spray equipment which runs off the engine cuts out. And I am in a stopped truck in complete darkness on County Road 8 at mile marker 11.4 at 3:47 in the morning with no lights and no engine and the fog in the tree line on my right and the pull-off on my left. I try to restart. The engine does not respond, not a crank, not an attempt, the kind of non-response that indicates a total loss of power to the ignition, which should not be possible given the truck's electrical system, which is a straightforward 12-volt system with no exotic features and no history of total ignition failure in its 5 years of service on this contract. I try 4 times. Nothing. I get out my phone to call the county dispatch, which is the protocol for a vehicle breakdown, and my phone has no signal, which is unusual because I have had signal on every other point of this route on every previous night, intermittent in some spots but not absent, and the absence at this exact location confirms something about this location that Roy's instruction was gesturing at without nomming. I sit in the dark truck for a moment and I make the decision that the situation calls for, which is to stay in the truck, stay on the road, and wait for the engine to do whatever it is going to do in the pattern that Roy described, which is eventually restart, which it did for the 2 previous techs whose trucks died here, whose trucks were eventually restarted, and who called their own tow trucks only after extended non-starting periods. I decide to wait. And in the waiting, in the dark and the silence of a stopped truck on County Road 8 at 3:47 in the morning, I become aware of something that the running engine and the spray equipment have been masking on every previous pass, something that is present in the silence of the stopped truck that has not been present in the sound of the running truck, something that is coming from the tree line on the right side of the road, from the section of the tree line where the fog sits and where the shape was standing on the first pass 2 hours ago. It is a sound below the threshold of what I would register from a moving truck with running engine and spray equipment. It is a low, complex sound, layered, not a single tone but a chord of tones, and it comes from the trees the way night sounds come from trees, from many directions simultaneously and from no specific direction. The acoustic character of a forest at night where sound bounces between trunks and canopy and comes to the listener without clear directionality. But this sound is not the random chorus of night insects and frogs and the biological noise of a living woodland at night. This sound is organized. It has a structure, a pattern, a repetition within its layers that is not the random pattern of nature, but the deliberate pattern of something that is producing it intentionally, that is making this sound the way a person makes a sound, with the intention of the sound doing something, of the sound reaching and affecting something. And I am the something in the vicinity of that intention. I am the only thing on this road at 3:47 in the morning that the sound could be intended for. And I am sitting in a dark stop truck 40 feet from the source of it with no engine and no lights and no phone signal, and I am very still. The fog in the tree line, visible to me now in the faint starlight above the canopy, moves. Not the drift of meteorological fog responding to air current. The positioned movement of something that has been holding still and has chosen to move. A slow advance of the fog from the tree line toward the road. A flowing movement that keeps its organized quality, that does not disperse as it moves the way real fog disperses, when it moves from still air into the relatively more turbulent air of an open road. And it comes to the edge of the pavement and stops, and the sound from the tree line is louder. And in the truck I can feel it in my chest in the way that very low frequencies are felt in the body before the ears register them. And the fog at the edge of the pavement is the fog from the tree line that has moved to the road's edge, and that is sitting at the road's edge in its patient, organized way. And it is 3:49 in the morning on County Road 8, and I am alone. The engine starts. At 3:51, without my touching the ignition key, without my attempting another restart, the engine turns over and starts fully, and the headlights come on, and the spray equipment comes back online, and the truck is running, and the road is in the headlights, and the fog at the road's edge, in the sudden headlight illumination, is just fog, is just water droplets in air, is dispersing in the way that fog disperses when headlights heat the air in front of a vehicle. And in 45 seconds it is gone and the road is clear, and I put the truck in gear and I drive. And I do not stop again on County Road 8 between mile markers 11 and 13 on any subsequent night of this contract, which ends in 3 weeks. And I do not know what was in the tree line, and I do not know what the sound was, and I do not know what the fog was in its positioned, patient, advancing quality. But I know what the pull-off does to trucks, and I know that Roy knew. And I know that the 2 previous texts knew in the way that you know something you cannot report in a work log, something you carry in the particular silence of a person who has been alone with something on a back road at 2 in the morning, and has decided that the professional version of surviving it is to do what the truck did, which is to start again and drive, which is what I do every remaining night of this contract, past mile marker 11, past mile marker 12, past mile marker 13. Eyes on the road, spray running, window up, not stopping, never stopping, and the fog in the trees watching me pass in its patient, organized way, nodding my passage, nodding my speed, nodding that I am not stopping, and accepting this for now. With the patience of something that has been in these trees longer than the road has been here, and that has no particular urgency about the resolution of what it started on a Wednesday night in July, when a spray truck sat dark and silent at the edge of its territory for 2 minutes while it considered what to do next. Story number 3. The anemometer on sensor post 4 has been recording a wind speed of 0 for the last 6 minutes, and the wind speed is not 0. I can feel it in my body through every layer I am wearing. Feel it trying to peel me off the ice shelf. Feel it in the exposed inch of skin between my balaclava and my goggles that is the one point of failure in my cold weather kit that no configuration of gear has ever fully eliminated. And the wind that I feel trying to peel me off the Rothera ice shelf at 4 in the morning is definitively not 0. And the anemometer is functioning correctly because I have just run the instrument check. And a functioning anemometer in a wind that is clearly not 0 should not be recording 0. And I am kneeling next to sensor post 4 in the dark with my headlamp and my tools, and the Antarctic wind doing what it does at 4 a.m. on the ice shelf, which is exactly what it wants, which is everything. And the anemometer is reading 0, and the reading is wrong. And the reading is wrong in a direction that I cannot explain with equipment failure, because equipment failure would give me a different wrong reading, and not this specific wrong reading of 0. And I have been an atmospheric scientist long enough to know the difference. I am going to tell you about the ice shelf before I tell you what was on it, because the ice shelf is not a place that most people have a real image of, and the real image matters for what I experienced on it. Matters in the way that context always matters for experience. The way that the same event in a familiar environment, and in the specific environment of the Brunt Ice Shelf extension, adjacent to the Rothera Research Station, produces entirely different qualities of experience. Entirely different registers of what the event means and what it costs. The ice shelf is ice, yes, but ice in a quantity and a character that has no equivalent in the ordinary world. It is not a frozen lake. It is not a glacier in the alpine sense that people have seen in photographs. It is a floating platform of ice that extends from the Antarctic continent into the Weddell Sea, hundreds of meters thick, the surface above sea level, a vast flat white plain in the daylight, and an absolute dark plain at night, featureless in any direction you look for as far as the ambient light reaches, which at 4 in the morning in polar conditions with no moon is approximately the range of your headlamp, which is 30 meters if you are generous, and beyond the 30 meters of your headlamp. In every direction is nothing, is the dark of a place that has no reference points, no landmarks, no features, no scale, a darkness in which the ice you are standing on and the air above you and the ice in every direction are all the same darkness, and the only thing separating you from the three-dimensional nothing of it is the headlamp and the instrument posts and the cable that tethers you to them. I am an Antarctic atmospheric scientist, specifically working on a long-term dataset about the behavior of the polar atmospheric boundary layer, the thin layer of atmosphere immediately adjacent to the ice surface, where the interaction of the ice and the air produces conditions that have significant implications for our models of global climate systems. The sensors at Rothera's ice shelf installation measure wind speed and direction, temperature at multiple heights, humidity, radiation balance, turbulence characteristics, and several more specialized parameters that make up the complete picture of what the atmosphere is doing at the ice-air interface. These sensors require regular physical inspection and maintenance, because the Antarctic environment is hostile to instruments in every way that an environment can be hostile to instruments. The cold affecting electronics and mechanical components, and the wind affecting everything that is exposed to it, which is everything, because on the ice shelf, there is nothing to shelter anything from the wind. The sensors are maintained on a schedule that requires physical visits every 48 hours regardless of conditions, regardless of weather, regardless of the time of day, which in winter is always the same, which is always dark, which is always 4 in the morning in the phenomenological sense, regardless of the clock. The winter rotation at Rothera has me responsible for the ice shelf sensor array on alternating nights, which means every other night I gear up in the full extreme cold, whether Kit and I walk the 400 meters from the station building to the first sensor post, and I work the array of 6 posts in sequence, post 1 through post 6, checking each instrument, replacing any data cards, making any field adjustments required by the inspection, and returning to the station before the cold has reduced my hand dexterity to the point where the fine motor work of instrument adjustment is no longer safe. At -30, which is a moderate Antarctic winter temperature, this gives me approximately 40 minutes of useful field time, after which the cold has reduced my gloved hands to a level of function that makes precision work unreliable. I am efficient in my field time. I have to be. Post 4 is the 4th post in the array, situated approximately 250 meters from the station building and 150 meters from the final posts 5 and 6, in the middle of the array geographically, and in the middle of the field time window temporally, when I have been outside long enough for the cold to have begun its work, but not long enough for it to have progressed to the point of genuine limitation. Post 4 is, for reasons I cannot account for with the data I have collected over 4 months at Rothera, the post that behaves differently, not consistently differently, intermittently differently. On most nights, post 4 is a normal sensor post with normal readings within expected parameters and no unusual behavior. On some nights, the nights I am working toward in this account, post 4 produces readings that are inconsistent with the readings at the adjacent posts in a way that equipment malfunction does not fully explain. Readings that suggest the atmospheric conditions at post 4 are different from the atmospheric conditions at posts 3 and 5, which are approximately 50 meters on either side of it, in ways that are physically possible but statistically improbable given the scale of the separation and the general homogeneity of the atmospheric boundary layer at that scale on the ice shelf. My supervisor at Rothera, a veteran Antarctic researcher named Stellan, who has wintered over 4 times, and who has the specific quality of calm that comes from having been in places and conditions that recalibrate a person's relationship to most things that other people find alarming, reviewed my early reports of the post 4 anomalies and told me 2 things. The first was scientific, a list of possible explanations including localized ice surface roughness, instrument calibration drift, data card artifacts, and several others, all of which I had already investigated and none of which satisfactorily accounted for the readings. The second thing Stellan told me was the thing he told me after the scientific explanations, after he had gone through the list and acknowledged that none of them fully explained the data, after he had looked at the post 4 location on the array map and held the silence of a person making a decision about what to include and what to leave out. He said that on his second winter over, a colleague of his who had been maintaining a similar array on a different section of the ice shelf had reported anomalous readings at one specific post in his array over a period of several weeks before the readings normalized. He said his colleague had described the anomalies as consistent with the presence of a large object near the post that was not present in the physical inspection, an object that was affecting the local wind field and the temperature measurements in the way that a large physical obstruction would affect them, but that was not visible and was not detectable by any physical means. He said his colleague filed a technical report attributing the anomalies to instrument calibration issues, and the report was accepted, and the anomalies eventually ceased, and the data from that post was flagged in the dataset, and the research continued. He said, in the flat tone that Antarctic veterans use for information they are delivering without editorial, that his colleague did not talk about the post-4 experience except that once, and that he, Stellan, did not think the calibration attribution was the complete explanation. He said this, and then he went back to his work and I went back to mine, and the post-4 readings continued on their intermittent schedule of anomaly and normality. The night of the 0 wind reading is my 43rd night at the array. I am at post 4, and the anemometer is reading 0 and the wind is not 0, and I have run the instrument check, and the instrument is functioning, and the reading is wrong in the specific direction of 0, and I am kneeling on the ice shelf in the dark with my headlamp and my tools and 40 minutes of field time, and I am trying to understand the reading. My headlamp illuminates the post and the instruments and the ice for approximately 30 meters in the direction I am facing, which is the direction of posts 5 and 6, the final 2 posts of the array ahead of me in the dark. I complete the post 4 inspection. I replace the data card. I make my log notes. The anemometer reads 0 throughout. I stand up to move to post 5. The headlamp shows me 30 meters of ice and the cable line leading to post 5 and nothing else. This is the normal view from post 4, normal in the sense of what the headlamp produces on most nights, 30 meters of ice and the cable and then darkness. On this night, the darkness at the edge of the headlamp's range has a quality that it does not have on most nights, a quality that I register before I understand what produces it. The way you register a change in air pressure before you understand it as weather. The darkness at the edge of the range is not uniform. It has a shape in it. Not a defined shape, not an outline with edges, but a shape in the way that a very dark object in slightly less dark surroundings has a shape, a differential, a region of greater density, and the region is large, and it is between me and post 5. And it is not a sensor post because I know where post 5 is, and the shape is not where post 5 is. And it is not a feature of the ice surface because I know this section of the ice surface, and it has no features at this scale. The wind at post 4 is 0 according to the anemometer. The wind against my body is not 0, and the shape in the darkness is at the edge of the headlamp range, and it is large and it is not moving, and it is between me and posts 5 and 6, and I need to reach posts 5 and 6 to complete my inspection, and I have 32 remaining minutes of field time, and the shape is there. I stand at post 4 and I look at the shape for 1 minute and 40 seconds by my watch, timing myself because the cold time budget does not accommodate extended observation pauses, and the shape does not move, and the wind against my body does not relent, and the anemometer reads 0 throughout the 1 minute and 40 seconds. I advance toward post 5. The cable line is my guide and I follow it and I walk toward the shape, and as I walk toward it the headlamp range advances with me and the shape retreats. Not moves, retreats. Maintains its position at the edge of my headlamp range, moving away from me at exactly the pace I move toward it, staying at the boundary of what my light can reach, staying in the zone between the lit and the dark, and the wind at my instruments is 0, and the wind at my body is 35 miles per hour, and I am following the cable toward post 5, and the shape is ahead of me, retreating, maintaining the boundary. And I walk and it retreats, and I walk and it retreats, and at the point where post 5 should be in the cable line distance, I reach the post, and the shape is now at the new 30-meter range limit. And I am at post 5, and I complete the inspection in the fastest time I have achieved on any post on any night. Data card, instrument check, log notes, 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And I stand up and look toward post 6, and the shape is at the edge of the range in the direction of post 6, and I follow the cable and it retreats, and I reach post 6 and complete that inspection. And I stand at post 6, which is the final post, which is the post from which I turn back toward the station. And the shape is at the edge of the headlamp range in the direction away from the station, in the direction of the open ice shelf and the wet LC beyond it. And it is between me and the open shelf, and I am between it and the station, and I turn and I walk back toward the station. And the shape does not follow, and the wind at my body drops to approximately what the station instruments are recording, which is 22 miles per hour, a reduction from the 35 I felt at the array, which is the reduction you would expect when moving away from an obstruction that has been creating a localized wind shadow. I reach the station. I remove my gear. I make my field notes. The post 4 anemometer data shows 0 for the duration of my time at the post, and normal readings beginning exactly at the time I departed post 4 for post 5. The data will be flagged as an instrument anomaly. The shape on the ice will not appear in any dataset. I sit in the station's common room at 5:15 in the morning, and Stellan is there making coffee, and he looks at me with the look of a 4-time winter rover who can read what a night on the ice has produced in a person's face, and he says, "Post 4." I say yes. He pours a second coffee and puts it in front of me and says nothing else, and I drink it and say nothing else. And that is the complete version of the conversation we have about what was on the ice between me and the outer posts, which is also the complete version of the conversation his colleague had with him about his own post 4 experience on a different ice shelf section, a different winter, and which is the version that this work produces, the abbreviated version. The version between people who have been in the place and have no need to describe what the place contains to each other because both of them already know, because the place has told them directly, on the ice in the dark, at the edge of the headlamp's range, in the shape that retreats at exactly the pace of your advance, and that waits at the boundary of your light with the patience of something that has been on the ice shelf longer than the sensor array, has been there and longer than the station has been there and longer than the continent has had a name, something that stands at the edge of what you can see and monitors you with the same patience and the same completeness that you are applying to your instruments, something that reads your outputs the way you read your data cards, and that files them somewhere in the cold and the dark of the ice shelf, in a dataset that no station on Earth has the instruments to access.